The sun was barely up when Deputy Sarah Holt pulled into the gravel lot behind the diner. The town of Waybrook woke slowly, like a place with secrets it didn't want disturbed. But today, something already felt wrong. A battered Buick sat crooked near the dumpster, its windows streaked with dust, its plates half obscured by mud. Sheriff's K-9, Riker, padded forward, nose twitching. One sniffed at the back door, and the dog bolted, whining, scratching at the dirt, refusing to return. Sarah's pulse hammered. She'd worked cases for 12 years, but nothing prepared her for what waited inside that car. If you enjoy unsettling cinematic stories like this one, stay close. There are more on the way. Quiet support means everything. The diner's neon sign hummed, casting a sickly red glow on the Buick's hood. Sheriff Dalton squatted near the bumper, his face lined from years of tobacco and sleepless nights. "Car been here since last night," he muttered, flicking his eyes at Sarah. "Marlene, the waitress, says she thought it belonged to a trucker. Didn't think much of it until the dog reacted." Sarah studied Riker. The German shepherd wasn't spooked easily. Trained in narcotics, bodies, explosives. He'd seen worse than she had. Yet now the dog trembled, hackles raised, nails raking the gravel like he was trying to dig a hole to escape. Dalton rose slowly, popped the trunk. Sarah's breath hitched. "We should wait for a warrant. Warrant take hours. You see that dog? Something's off. If there's a kid in there..." The words hung heavy, cruel in their possibility. Sarah reached for the trunk lever with steady hands that didn't feel steady at all. The Buick creaked open. Inside, only a folded blanket. Dark stains at one corner. A faint metallic smell, not fresh, but recent enough to catch the throat. Dalton swore under his breath. "Not good." Sarah touched the blanket edge with a gloved hand. Sticky. Old blood. She was certain. "Car registered?" she asked, stepping back. Dalton nodded at the dispatcher, scribbling notes. Plates run cold. Mud's covering the real numbers. Someone didn't want this traced. Riker barked suddenly, frantic, circling back toward the passenger side door. He pawed at the handle. "Check inside," Dalton ordered. Sarah tugged the handle. Unlocked. The stench hit first, sweet, rotten, unmistakable. Her stomach twisted. On the floorboard, beneath the passenger seat, something glinted. A bracelet. Child-size. Pink plastic beads strung together. One cracked down the middle. She remembered her own daughter wearing the same cheap kind before she left for college. Her throat tightened. Dalton crouched beside her. He didn't speak, just stared at the bracelet, as if the silence between them was answer enough. The Buick was towed behind the sheriff's office, wrapped in yellow tape. Riker refused to go near it again, pulling against his leash until Sarah relented and walked him to the far side of the lot. Inside the cramped station, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, files stacked on every desk, the air stale with burnt coffee. Waybrook wasn't built for big cases. It was a town of fishing holes, unpaid bar tabs, and gossip that traveled faster than facts. Dalton paced by the whiteboard, his boots scuffing the tile. "We got stains. A bracelet. No ID in the car. Whoever dumped it knew enough to cover plates, but not enough to torch it. Amateur, maybe, or careless, or deliberate," Sarah said quietly, "wanting it found." Dalton stopped. His eyes were pale blue, sharp even when bloodshot. "Explain." She crossed her arms, suddenly aware of the whole department listening. 2 deputies, a dispatcher, a part-time clerk. The car was left in plain sight, not hidden. Near the diner. People were bound to notice. "You think it's bait?" "I think," she said, weighing the words, "someone wants us looking at that car instead of something else." Dalton didn't reply. He didn't have to. The silence was heavy, threaded with the weight of shared dread. That night, Sarah sat in her driveway, engine off, listening to the cicadas hum across the dark fields. Her daughter's old bike leaned against the porch railing, rust creeping along the chain. For a moment, she let herself think of Natalie at college 2 states away. Safe, busy, distracted by exams and boys. She told herself not to call, not to imagine the bracelet in the Buick as hers. Her phone buzzed. Dalton. Need you back at the lot, he said. Voice tight. We ran the VIN. Sarah's grip on the steering wheel tightened. And car belonged to Peter Crane. The name clanged like a drop wrench. Crane, the man who lived on the edge of town in the sagging farmhouse. The man who everyone said kept himself too much. Who'd once been questioned in connection to a missing girl, but never charged. Sarah swallowed. I'll be there in 10. The farmhouse sat hunched against the horizon, windows dark, fields overgrown. The kind of place children dare each other to run past on Halloween. Dalton's cruiser idled at the gate. He leaned against it, shotgun slung over one arm. No lights inside, he said as Sarah approached. No sign of him. Neighbors? Closest one's a mile off. Doubt they'd hear a thing. Sarah studied the house. Shingles missing. Porch board sagging. Curtains that hadn't been drawn in years. Yet the mailbox was empty. Fresh tracks pressed into the mud driveway. Someone had been here recently. Dalton motioned her forward. We check it. Careful. The front door groaned when she pushed it. The smell hit next. Cigarettes. Something sour beneath it all. Inside, the living room was a clutter of magazines, beer cans, and something else. Children's toys scattered across the floor. A doll missing an eye. A toy truck, wheels snapped. None of it new. Sarah's heart thudded painfully. Jesus, Dalton whispered. They moved room to room. Kitchen sink stacked with plates. Bedroom mattress bare, stained. Closet full of coats that didn't look like men's. Then the sound, scratching, from beneath the floor. Sarah froze. Dalton raised the shotgun. The scratching grew louder, frantic. Basement, Sarah whispered. They found the door half hidden behind a bookshelf. Dalton yanked it open. Stairs descended into darkness. Riker barked, straining against a leash, pulling toward the steps. Dalton flicked his flashlight on. The beam cut through cobwebs, landing on dirt floor. Something moved in the corner. Small, trembling. Sarah's breath caught. A little girl, no older than 8. Knees pulled to her chest, hair matted, face streaked with grime. She blinked against the light, whispering something Sarah couldn't hear. Dalton lowered the gun. His voice broke, rougher than she'd ever heard it. Call it in. But as Sarah fumbled for her radio, she noticed something else in the shadows. Behind the girl, half buried in dirt, was another shape. Too still, too quiet, not alive. Her hand shook as she raised the radio to her mouth. And upstairs, somewhere in the darkness of the farmhouse, a floorboard creaked. The creak above their heads snapped both Sarah and Dalton into stillness. The radio in Sarah's hand hissed with static, her thumb hovering over the call button. Riker growled low, throat rumbling like distant thunder, his body angled toward the staircase leading back up. Dalton raised a finger to his lips. Silence. He shifted his weight, the old wood groaning beneath his boots. Sarah's pulse hammered so hard, she feared the sound alone might give them away. The little girl in the corner whimpered. Sarah crouched, keeping her voice to a whisper. It's okay, sweetheart. We're not here to hurt you. The child pressed her dirty face into her knees. She didn't answer. The floor above creaked again, this time deliberate, slow, like someone pacing. Dalton leaned close. His breath smelled faintly of chew. He's still here. Sarah's stomach nodded. We can't leave her. Then we get her out. Dalton said, Quiet. Riker tugged against the leash, straining toward the stairs. The hair along his spine stood rigid. Dalton glanced at Sarah, then at the girl. Pick her up? We move fast. Sarah slipped her radio back onto her belt and inched forward. She reached for the girl's arm, but the child flinched violently, eyes wide, lips trembling. Don't, she whispered. He said not to. Sarah froze. Who? Peter Crane? The girl nodded, so small it was barely movement. Dalton mouthed, Go. Sarah gathered the girl up, her tiny frame feather-light but rigid as a board. The smell of dirt and sweat clung to her. Sarah's throat tightened, memories of Natalie at that age flashing unwanted behind her eyes. She clutched the girl tighter. Dalton gestured upward with 2 fingers, then started up the stairs, Shotgun raised. Sarah followed, heart slamming in her chest. The house was darker now, like the shadows had grown teeth. At the top of the stairs, Dalton pressed his back to the wall, listening. The silence was deafening. Then, faintly, the scrape of a boot. Dalton whipped his head toward the sound. The hallway. "Go!" he whispered. "Get her out?" Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to demand backup, but the girl trembled against her chest, her breath hitching. Sarah forced herself to move. Step by step, down the hall, through the cluttered living room, toward the front door. The porch loomed just ahead when a figure moved in the corner of her vision. Tall, broad-shouldered, a shotgun cradled in his arms. Peter Crane, his eyes locked on hers, glassy and fever-bright, his mouth twisted into something halfway between a smile and a snarl. "You put her down," he rasped. Sarah froze, every nerve screaming. Behind her, Dalton's voice thundered from a hallway. "Crane, drop it." Crane's shotgun swung toward Sarah. Reflex took over. She twisted, shielding the girl with her body. Riker lunged, teeth flashing, clamping down on Crane's forearm. The gun went off, deafening in the small space. Plaster raining from the ceiling. Sarah stumbled through the doorway, clutching the girl. She hit the porch hard, rolling onto the gravel. The child screamed, clutching Sarah's shirt with tiny fists. Inside, chaos. Dalton shouting. Another gunshot. Riker barking, snarling. Then silence. Sarah's lungs burned. She scrambled to her feet, carrying the girl to the cruiser. She shoved her into the back seat, heart pounding so hard she could hardly think. From the house, footsteps crunched across the porch. Dalton emerged, face pale, shotgun hanging loose in one hand. Riker limped beside him, blood streaking his fur. Sarah's throat clenched. "Where's Crane?" Dalton's eyes flicked toward the doorway. Not going to be a problem anymore. The way he said it chilled her. At the station, paramedics whisked the girl away. She hadn't spoken another word, not even when they tried to ask her name. Just clung to the plastic bracelet Sarah had retrieved from the Buick. Dalton sat in his office, cigarette smoke curling through the half-open window. He looked years older than he had that morning. Sarah leaned against the doorframe. "You shot him?" Dalton didn't look up. Didn't have a choice. "You sure about that?" His jaw tightened. "You questioning me, Holt?" She crossed her arms. "I was there. I saw Riker had him. You could have disarmed him." Dalton finally looked at her. His eyes were bloodshot, his expression unreadable. "You weren't in my line of sight. You don't know how close that barrel was." Sarah studied him. She wanted to believe him, needed to, but something in his tone scratched at her gut. "You ever wonder," Dalton said, flicking ash into the tray, "why Crane never left town after the last girl went missing? Everyone suspected him. You'd think he'd run, unless he thought someone had his back." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Sarah blinked. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Crane wasn't smart enough to cover his tracks like that. Someone helped him. Someone in this town." Sarah felt a cold ripple of dread. Waybrook was small. Everyone knew everyone. If Dalton was right, it meant someone they shook hands with at the diner every morning was part of this. By midnight, the station was empty except for Sarah, Dalton, and Riker, patched up, though he whimpered with every step. Sarah sat at her desk, staring at the evidence bag. Inside was a pink bracelet. She remembered how the child had whispered. He said not to. The fear wasn't just a Crane. It was bigger, deeper. She stood, the chair legs screeching against tile. Dalton's door was closed, a strip of yellow light beneath it. She knocked once, then pushed it open. Dalton was hunched over his desk, staring at a folder. When he looked up, his face was hollow. "What's that?" Sarah asked. He slid the folder toward her. Newspaper clippings. Photos. Missing children. All girls, all under 10. Sarah's stomach lurched. "How many?" "6, Dalton said. "Over the last 20 years. None ever found. Until tonight." She flipped through the pages with trembling hands. Each face stared back at her, frozen in time, smiling in school portraits. "Crane," she whispered, Dalton shook his head. Maybe some. Not all. He wasn't even in town when the first one disappeared. Sarah felt the room tilt. Then who? Dalton's gaze locked on hers. Cold. Steady. That's what keeps me up at night. A silence stretched between them, broken only by Riker's restless pacing. Then Sarah noticed something on the last page of the file. A handwritten note in Dalton's scrawl. Check Buick connection. Her heart skipped. You already knew about the car. Dalton's expression flickered. What? She pushed the folder back toward him, her pulse racing. You wrote this before Marlene even called it in. His jaw clenched. For a moment, she thought he'd deny it. Then he leaned back, cigarette smoke curling around his head like a halo turned black. Careful, Hope. His voice was low. Warning. You don't know what you're poking at. Sarah's skin prickled. A bitter taste rose in her mouth. Dalton knew more than he'd ever let on, and if he'd known about the Buick before, she realized, with a hollow kind of certainty, that trust between them had just broken. She drove home at 2 a.m., headlights cutting through the fog that clung to the fields. The child's face haunted her, the dirt, the fear, the way she hadn't spoken except to repeat Crane's threat. Sarah pulled into her driveway and sat there, staring at the darkness of her own house. The porch light flickered. She didn't go inside. Couldn't. Instead, she dialed her daughter's number. It rang 3 times before Natalie's tired voice answered. Mom, it's the middle of the night. Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to tell her everything. The Buick, the girl, Dalton's secrets. But all she said was, I just needed to hear your voice. Natalie sighed, half asleep. You okay? Sarah looked out at the empty road. Shadows pressing against the edges of the world. I don't know, she whispered. When the call ended, she sat in silence until dawn began to gray the horizon. She didn't notice the figure watching from the tree lean. Morning crept over Waybrook with a sky the color of ash. Sarah hadn't slept. Her coffee sat untouched on the kitchen table, growing cold as the events replayed in her head. The Buick, the child, Crane's wild eyes, Dalton's cigarette smoke warning. Riker lay at her feet, restless, ears twitching at sounds she couldn't hear. He'd saved her life the night before. Now even he seemed uneasy, as though something still lingered in the air. At 7 sharp, her phone buzzed. Dispatcher's voice urgent. Sheriff wants you at Crane's property. They're bringing ground-penetrating radar. Says they maybe found something. Sarah's stomach dropped. What kind of something? Better get here quick. By the time she reached the farmhouse, the place buzzed with deputies, state investigators. Even a news van at the edge of the drive. The old house loomed silent, its windows blind. Dalton stood by the barn, his broad frame dwarfed by the equipment humming in the dirt. A technician waved her over. We've got anomalies, he said, pointing at the screen. Multiple voids beneath the field, shapes consistent with burial sites. Sarah's throat went dry. They began to dig. The first shovel of dirt gave way to a stench, so heavy it seemed to seep into her skin. A deputy gagged. Another swore under his breath. Then came fabric. A fragment of pink cloth, stiff with age. Bones beneath it, small, fragile. Sarah turned away, bow rising. One by one, the earth surrendered its secrets. 4 graves, all children. The crowd fell silent, the air thick with dread. Dalton lit a cigarette, his hand steady. Crane did this, he said flatly. Sarah studied him. His face was hard, but his eyes flickered, not grief, not shock. Something else. Something she couldn't name. You sound certain, she said. He exhaled smoke, never meeting her gaze. Who else could it be? Her skin prickled. That evening, Sarah sat in the records room, surrounded by dusty boxes. She pulled every file on the missing girls Dalton had shown her. Dates, witness statements, rumors. But something didn't fit. The first girl disappeared in spring '02. Crane had been arrested that same month. Bar fight in a town 2 counties over. He'd been in jail for 6 weeks. The girl had vanished right in the middle of it. Sarah leaned back, heart pounding. Crane couldn't have taken her. So who had? Her eyes fell on the signature at the bottom of the incident reports. Sheriff Thomas Dalton. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She drove back to the station. Dalton's truck sat out front, headlights still warm. His office door was closed, light under the crack again. Sarah's hand hovered over the knob. She turned it slowly, pushing the door open without knocking. Dalton sat behind his desk, not with a cigarette this time, but with a flask. Papers spread before him. He looked up, his eyes shadowed. "You digging where you shouldn't?" he asked. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "You knew Crane couldn't have taken the first girl. He was locked up, but you wrote his name in every report." Dalton's jaw flexed. He didn't answer. "You used him," Sarah whispered. "The whole town suspected him, and you let it ride. Convenient scapegoat." "Careful," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "Those graves weren't just Crane's doing, were they?" she pressed. The silence was worse than any confession. Dalton stood, slow and deliberate. "You think you know what kind of town this is? You don't. Waybrook doesn't change. People look the other way. Always have. Always will." Her throat tightened. "And you?" His eyes burned into hers. "I kept order. You think anyone wanted the truth? Better one monster in the shadows than a dozen. I gave them a name. Crane. And people slept at night." Her stomach turned. "You protected this place, not the kids." Something in his face cracked then, a flicker of the man she once trusted. Regret, maybe, or just the ghost of it. "Walk away, Hope," he said. "You've got a daughter. You know what's at stake." Her chest seized. He'd never mentioned Natalie before. The way he said it, like a threat, sent ice through her veins. Riker growled low at her side, teeth bared. Dalton's hand hovered near his belt, fingers brushing the butt of his pistol. The room felt suffocating. Two paths hung between them. Fight or leave. Sarah's voice came out hoarse. "If you were the kind of man you pretend to be, you'd put the gun down." For the first time that night, Dalton looked uncertain. His shoulders sagged just slightly, but he didn't drop his weapon. Instead, he stepped aside. "You want the files? Take them. Won't matter. No one will believe you. This town belongs to its secrets." She grabbed the folders, her hands trembling. Riker backed out with her, never breaking his stare on Dalton. She left without another word. Days blurred together. The graves at Crane's farm made headlines, but the narrative was simple, neat. Crane was the monster. Dalton the hero who finally ended him. The town swallowed the story whole. But Sarah knew. The truth pressed against her chest like a stone she couldn't set down. Late one night, she sat on her porch, Natalie's voice in her memory. Riker stretched at her feet. The cicadas sang. She opened the folder again, staring at the faces of the lost girls. 6 smiles frozen forever. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A voice, faint, childlike, came through. "Don't tell," it whispered. Her blood ran cold. The line went dead. Riker stirred, ears pricked, staring into the fields beyond the porch. The darkness there seemed endless. Sarah closed the file, holding it tight to her chest. She knew the fight wasn't over. Not here, not in Waybrook. But for now, she stayed still, listening to night, her heart beating in time with the cicadas. Because sometimes survival wasn't about shouting the truth. It was about living long enough to whisper it to someone who'd finally listen.